Ancient history is in many ways obscure and mysterious, but the work of experts in multiple disciplines has brought to light many fascinating aspects of ancient cultures over the years. In this video, I'm talking about some of the more mind-blowing facts about the ancient world, things that astounded me when I first found out about them. We know that experts think many megalithic monuments had astronomical alignments and that most of these date to the Neolithic and Bronze Age. However, there's some evidence in the United Kingdom that structures were aligned with solar and lunar phenomena as far back as the Mesolithic. The Mesolithic was the time when people transitioned from a hunter-gatherer way of life to living in fixed settlements based around agriculture and animal husbandry. The first example is centered on one of the most famous megalithic sites in the world, Stonehenge. It went through several phases of construction and was part of an extensive megalithic and ceremonial landscape. However, it now seems that the area had not only been inhabited since the Mesolithic, but had also been used for rituals since then. In 1966, archaeologists found 3 post holes in the old tourist car park to the northwest of Stonehenge, which date to between 8,500 and 7,650 BCE, so firmly in the Mesolithic. They worked out that the holes had once held posts made of pine wood, which measured around 1 meter in diameter. The pits had been dug 1 meter deep and about 10 meters apart from one another. It seems the pine posts rotted in situ. The post holes have an east-west alignment, so may have been used for astronomical observations connected to rituals. However, based on radiocarbon dating, experts think that each post may have been successive to the previous one. So it's the individual post that would have had a particular function, not the row as a whole. Another pit, which experts determined to have been a tree hole, was also in alignment with the other 3 holes, but its significance has never been established. Another example is Warren Field in Aberdeenshire, Scotland. It's the site of 12 pits dating to around 8000 BCE. Archaeologists have also found evidence for a Neolithic timber hut near the pits. The site was first spotted from the air by the Royal Commission on the Ancient and Historical Monuments of Scotland before being excavated in 2004. Experts have determined that the pits are aligned with the midwinter solstice and may have been used to track the moon rolling along the southern horizon at that time of year. Burnt material and flint was found in several of the pits, which probably points towards some sort of ritual deposition. 2 pits showed evidence for having held wooden stakes as well. Of course, it's always possible that such an alignment is a coincidence. Researchers have, however, found several other pit arrangements in the northeast of Scotland with similar alignments. So it's possible that a cluster of monuments had a similar function because measuring such solar and lunar phenomena was important to the Mesolithic inhabitants of the region. I've been to Rome many times and I've read a lot about the ancient Romans, so of course I'm familiar with the founding myth of the city featuring the twins Romulus and Remus. But until recently, I wasn't so familiar with the extended version of the myth, which goes back much further in time and features a number of interesting characters, a connection to the Trojan War, and ancient Greece. Let's start with the most popular version of the myth and then go back a little further. Legend has it that the twin brothers Romulus and Remus were born in Alba Longa, a city in the Alban hills that predated Rome. Their mother, Rhea Silvia, was the daughter of the Latin king Numitor, who had been overthrown by his brother Amulius. Forced to become a Vestal virgin so that she would remain chaste and not produce offspring with a claim to the throne, Rhea was seduced by the god Mars and fell pregnant. This implies, by the way, that the famous cult of the Vestal Virgins has a very long pre-Roman history. Anyway, After giving birth to the twins Romulus and Remus, King Amulius had Rhea imprisoned and ordered for the boys to be killed. However, whilst floating down the river Tiber in a basket, they were rescued and suckled by a she-wolf before being raised by a shepherd and his wife. Eventually, they decided to build a city in the rural area they had been raised, but an argument ensued with Romulus killing Remus, building Rome by himself, and becoming its first king. Chronologically, there's a lot of confusion between the different stories which feature the extended version of the myth, but here I'll talk about the most common one. It starts with a king called Evander, who arrived in the area of the future Rome from Arcadia in the Peloponnese 60 years before the Trojan War. He founded a settlement on the Palatine Hill, which supposedly got its name from Palantion in his home region of Arcadia. Evander then started a cult of Hercules at the Ara Maxima, meaning greatest altar. In the aftermath of the Trojan War, the famous Trojan Ennius travelled to the Italian peninsula and met Evander, eventually marrying his daughter Lavinia. Ennius founded the city of Lavinium, and his son Ascanius founded the city of Alba Longa. There were then many kings of Alba Longa over the years, before Numitor came along, who was overthrown by his brother Amulius. Romulus and Remus and their mother Rhea then come into the picture. So in this extended version of the myth, Rome already existed as a relatively sophisticated settlement on the Palatine Hill, with a great altar and a cult of Hercules, at least 60 years before the Trojan War. However, it was not given its name until the descendants of Ennius, Romulus, and Remus were born. So in this myth, we have a connection to ancient Greece and ancient Anatolia. As you can probably guess if you don't already know, papyrus was first used for writing in ancient Egypt. The first papyrus was excavated from the tomb of a court official called Himaka, who died during the reign of the First Dynasty king known as Den at the beginning of the 3rd millennium BCE. In Himaka's impressive mastaba-style tomb in Saqqara, archaeologists found many objects, including a circular disc engraved with hunting dogs and a gazelle, an ivory label, and a lined wooden box containing 2 unused papyrus scrolls. The First Dynasty was the time when Upper and Lower Egypt were united, when the divine right of kings was established as an ideology, and the hieroglyphic writing system was implemented. However, the earliest written papyri date back to 2500 BCE, and were discovered at the Wadi al-Jarfin harbour on the Red Sea in 2013. 30 papyri were found inside caves at the port, written in hieroglyphics by an inspector called Mera, who had a staff of 200 men. The papyri detail the construction timetable of the Great Pyramid of Khufu at Giza and work at the limestone quarries. Referred to by archaeologists as a logbook, the papyri also discuss the transport by boat of limestone from the mine at Chura, near modern-day Cairo, to the pyramid to be used as casing. One of these journeys took 4 days and involved the River Nile as well as many canals. Other details include livestock numbers and food supplies. Before the monuments and material culture of ancient Egypt developed along the Nile Valley and in its delta region, it seems that the ancestors of this sophisticated civilization inhabited the western desert of the Sahara and also had construction and astronomical skills. The best evidence for this comes from the site known as Nabta Playa. The name refers to a dry lake bed, which in the Neolithic would have filled with water on a seasonal basis. At that time, the surrounding area would have had a lot of greenery, so it was very different to the dry desert landscape that exists there today. Archaeologists have discovered evidence for habitation at Nabta Playa by semi-nomadic cattle herders from the early Neolithic onwards. The lake and surrounding vegetation created ideal conditions for pasture and crop cultivation. However, the most incredible find at Nabta Playa was a series of megaliths dating to the early 5th millennium BCE, some standing as isolated menhirs, with others forming a stone circle. Archaeologists discovered that 2 pairs of the standing stones were aligned north-south, and 2 other pairs were aligned with the midsummer solstice. Archaeologists think the megaliths were used as a calendar so that the semi-nomadic pastoralists knew when the rains would arrive, something that appears to have been celebrated by the slaughtering of some cattle who were buried in graves marked with flat stones. One intriguing burial was of a menhir shaped to look like a cow rather than an actual cow. Other finds at the site include cattle bones, flint arrowheads, stone axes, grindstones, pottery, and ostrich eggshells, which were used as water carriers and jewellery. I've put a photograph here that I took of some flint arrowheads that are in a museum in Malta. The label says that they originated in the Sahara Desert, but I have no idea if they are from Nabta Playa, probably not. There's not much information on the label, but it's amazing to think that the Sahara was once, and quite recently, much greener. There's an increasing amount of evidence that in ancient times, people were undertaking vision quests and carrying out rituals with the help of altered states of consciousness. This sort of activity may have been at the core of the secretive mystery school ceremonies in ancient Greece. For a long time, the evidence came from iconography and mythology. However, the area of archaeobotanical research is becoming more and more useful in understanding what the ancients may have used as a catalyst for these altered states of consciousness. As an example, experts wondered what drove the cohesiveness that must have existed amongst the community at Göbekli Tepe for them to have built such an extensive complex before the agricultural revolution even took place. What made these hunter-gatherers stop and work together on this monumental undertaking? Archaeologists discovered 6 barrel and trough-shaped vessels at Göbekli Tepe, which could have held up to 160 litres of liquid, and found that they contained oxalate, which is released from malt during mashing and usually needs to be removed from beer kegs. The tests were not conclusive, but if evidence for the fermentation of beer can be confirmed, then it's thought a taste for alcohol may have been the key driver behind crop domestication and monument building in the region. Many of the features of Göbekli Tepe are thought to indicate that rituals took place there, and there's a lot of evidence for feasting as well. So it's not a leap to suggest that beer and ritual feasting were central to its community. At the Iron Age site of Mascastellar de Pontos in Spain, the ergo fungus was found in several human teeth excavated from the site. Of course, since ergo infects harvests and was not understood or routinely removed in ancient times, there's a possibility that it was ingested accidentally. But it's also possible that it was taken as part of a ritual in order to enter an altered state of consciousness. There's a lot of research into this, and so I can't go into detail in this segment. However, it's quite incredible to think that the ancients may have imbibed substances for ritual purposes, just like in the shamanic practices we are familiar with today. The Etruscans inhabited what is now known as Tuscany, as well as a few other areas on the Italian peninsula, from the late Iron Age until they were assimilated into the ancient Roman culture. Their origins are a mystery, as is their language. However, various aspects of their culture are well understood from archaeological finds and the texts the Romans wrote about them. One interesting fact about the Etruscans is that they were expert diviners, also known as haruspices. The Romans were so impressed with their talent for this that they passed legislation to preserve the ancient custom amongst the Etruscans, a skill that appears to have been passed down in families. Their divination method was based on the observation of sacrificed animal entrails, which sounds messy. The animals and entrails that were used varied. However, it was most common to analyze the livers of sheep or poultry. To facilitate their interpretation of the liver, the haruspices had annotated bronze models which guided them. The whole idea of the process was to figure out the will of the deities so that actions could be taken to maintain peace. One of these bronze artifacts was found in a field in Piacenza and dates to the 2nd century BCE. It's amazing to think that the alphabet we use today was created by turquoise miners in ancient Egypt, probably because the hieroglyphic script of the land was difficult to understand. Around 1900 BCE, during ancient Egypt's Middle Kingdom, a series of turquoise mines in the mountains of southern Sinai gained importance on an industrial scale. These mines were in the area known as Serebit el-Qadim. For 800 years, a temple to Hathor built near the mines offered spiritual protection to those working in them and making the long journeys to and from this desert region. The inside of the temples, as well as many stelae leading up to it, were decorated with hieroglyphic inscriptions. No one knows who invented hieroglyphs, but they appeared fully formed during the First Dynasty and were probably created on purpose by court officials after trading with Mesopotamia and seeing how useful their cuneiform inscriptions were for administration. In 1917, the Egyptologist William Flinders Petrie and his wife Hilda discovered graffiti in and around the mines and realized that it was quite different to the hieroglyphs they had become accustomed to seeing at archaeological sites. Flinders Petrie was convinced that the script was the first alphabetic system to be discovered, but this was only confirmed when the characters were translated by the Egyptologist Alan Gardner in 1916. After studying the inscriptions, he recognized the Canaanite word Balat, the female counterpart to Baal, and a possible equivalent to the goddess Hathor, who was worshipped at the temple next to the mines. Furthermore, two inscriptions were found on a 25-centimeter Sphinx figurine inside the temple, in both hieroglyphs and the strange script. The first read the beloved Hathor, the mistress of turquoise, and the second read the beloved of Balat. It became apparent that the strange script was in fact a simplified version of hieroglyphs, but instead of a sign representing a word, it represented a consonant only. This was the first alphabetic script and is known by experts as Proto-Sinaitic. It went through many incarnations before becoming the Latin alphabet that we use today. The letter H that we use today started its life as the Egyptian hieroglyph for offense, before becoming the Proto-Sinaitic Hassa, the Phoenician Heth, and the seventh letter of the Greek alphabet Eta. An astrarium or planetarium used mechanics to track astronomical objects, including the sun, the moon, and the planets. The Antikythera Mechanism, dating to the 2nd century BCE and excavated from a shipwreck, is thought to have been an early version of one of these. It's often referred to as the world's oldest computer, but I was astonished by just how complicated it is. Since its discovery at the beginning of the 20th century, a lot of work has gone into understanding how it functioned, and it took recent advances in scanning technology to really get an idea of how the whole mechanism worked. Since the object is fragmented and made of highly corroded bronze as well as wood, high-resolution 3D X-rays were needed to determine the complex set of gears within it. Scientists found that the mechanism was used to track the movement of the astronomical bodies, as well as to predict eclipses and work out the variable motion of the moon caused by its elliptical orbit. Scans also revealed thousands of inscriptions inside the mechanism that appear to have been an instruction manual for the device. They discuss the movement of the planets and even list the numbers of their synodic cycles. The more that the Antikythera mechanism revealed itself to experts, the more shocked they were, since they hadn't realized how advanced the knowledge of the ancient Greeks who invented it was. So there you have it, 8 facts about the ancient past that, in my opinion, are pretty mind-blowing. If you enjoyed my video, please hit the like button, subscribe if you don't already, and take a look at the other uploads on my channel. I want to say a big thank you to my patrons. If anyone else wants to join my Patreon community, the link is in the description below. Tiers start at €5 per month. Come and find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, where I post regularly. I've also got a website with some further information on the sites I visit myself and the articles I write for magazines, megalithhunter.com.